As many of you know, I am a massive fan of the roguelike genre. So my mind was completely blown when I discovered a game like Vampire Survivors, which I did do a review on a couple weeks ago. So make sure you check that out. But my mind was completely blown when Vampire Survivors came out, when it kind of started this minimalist roguelike genre. And at the time when I first started playing, I gotta admit it really didn't capture me in the way like Enter the Gungeon did, where you're jumping around and flipping up tables for cover, and there's a lot more response to how you play the game. But Vampire Survivors definitely had a unique charm and a very retro aesthetic to it, and the more I played it, and the more I began to unlock other characters and other skills, it became a much more challenging game than appears to be on the surface. Well, not to be outdone, we now have Brotato, which came out actually last year in 2023 by one guy, believe it or not. He made a studio called Blobfish, but it's just one dude, kind of like how Trent Reznor is 9 Inch Nails. This guy is Blobfish, Thomas Gervrod from France. And I think that's really cool that one dude could pull this off. So he made a game called Brotato, which you're looking at now. And I want to caveat as I kind of talk about this review, Thomas screwed up because he didn't give us ultra-wide support. If you play this game in ultra-wide, it pushes the picture all the way to the left and all the way to the top edge of your screen, and it looks horrible. So I had to play it in a windowed mode, but because I couldn't get the window exactly the dimensions I wanted at 1920 by 1080, I went ahead and threw a pink border around it, so at least it frames the screen. So when you're playing it, you will not have a hot pink screen. That is my own spin on this game. It's frustrating. I've seen people talk about it because it's been around for a while. Doesn't seem like Thomas cares too very much because it still hasn't been fixed. So if you're playing it on Game Pass like I am on PC and you have a monitor with a higher resolution, well, be ready to play windowed because it's not going to look very good. Additionally, it looks phenomenal on Xbox. So there you have it. So if you got a console, go play it on the console because I think you're going to have a little bit better time. All right, so in case you haven't figured out, we're already on wave 4 of this game. This is what I would consider a very minimalist roguelike game. You only control the bro. The Brotato is all you get. You basically pick one of a smorgasbord of bros that will join you in your conquest to basically defeat all of the baddies. And what happens is, as you play, just like with Vampire Survivors, as you play for a certain amount of time, after you kill a certain amount of enemies, after you use a certain type of gun, after you collect so much money, whatever, you'll begin to unlock more and more of these starting characters, which do, just like Vampire Survivors, have distinct weaknesses and strengths. I'm just playing with the kind of all-rounder Brotato. He's not really good or bad at anything. He's just kind of a dude. Later on, if you want to get into some trickier builds, you can find characters that do unique things. And a lot of this game is always going to be a trade-off, and that's what makes it so fun, is that if you want to really invest much more into one particular type of build over another, you can. And that is where the enjoyment and the refinement and the replayability of this game really starts to kind of take a great stride, is when you're able to basically build the character you want from the beginning. Now, of course, as with all roguelites, you're limited by the quality of your rolls. There's a really good chance that you might need the perfect thing and you can't find it, but that's okay because this game does have a reroll system. In addition, a really nice feature that it has is you're allowed to lock upgrades. So if you don't have enough money and this really powerful gun drops on the second wave and it's perfect for your build, but you're just not quite there yet, well, you can lock it in place at no charge. and just keep it until you're ready to invest. And I think that is such a phenomenal move. It does take that very traditional roguelite, make a decision, live with it type consequences, but it does inject a layer of strategy. And I think, to me, after playing this game for a couple hours, that is where I feel it really is distinctly different than other roguelites I've played, where if you have played enough and you kind of know where you want to go, or you know what kind of weapons you're expecting or what kind of perk you're looking for, you can kind of begin to spec your character in that direction. And I think that is a really smart idea. If you're playing for the first time, or you're somebody who doesn't seem like you're going to invest thousands and billions of hours into this game, it's something that isn't going to detract away from your experience, because you're still going to be selecting from the same 4 choices that you do at the end of every level. They might not have as much consequence or meaning to you, but for somebody who's a little more advanced and kind of understands the core concept of this game, it's something that greatly enhances gameplay. And I really, really hope going forward, other roguelike games take a page out of this book and really look at the best way to allow this mass replayability without smashing your head on the wall because you lose all your stuff at the beginning. But here, as you continue to unlock more things in the weapon pool, and as they appear more in the shops, well, you're going to be able to build that perfect character. And I think that is just so, so neat. Now, my biggest criticism with the game is that it's just like Vampire Survivors, in the sense that at times it feels kind of mind-numbingly boring. You're not shooting, you're not pressing any buttons, you're not activating cooldowns, you're not activating skills. You're just moving your controller stick up, down, left, or right. Or I guess if you wanted to use a keyboard like a total savage, you could. But that's all you're doing. Your character is going to automatically pick up items that are nearby. Your character is going to automatically shoot and reload at the enemy that it deems the biggest threat, which is usually the one that's in closest proximity to your character. And that's all you're going to be doing. You're just going to be walking around. You'll notice that enemy patterns have an ebb and flow to them at times. They seem significantly more difficult than others, as they kind of lull you into a sense of power and then quickly snatch it away from you. Your character is pretty weak. You don't have a lot of health points, and unfortunately, the rules for how enemies attack you are not consistent either. While it is cool to have some enemies doing these massive wind-up attacks where they'll swing a sword, or they'll like dive or charge into you, or whatever it happens to be, a very telegraphed attack, right? Those are always welcome. Additionally, you're going to find enemies that just shoot at you, so you just got to basically dodge the pellets, the old bullet hell game. And if you've played a lot of Returnal, you'll probably do phenomenal at that as well. But then there's a lot of enemies that are kind of in between that you can walk through that don't really hurt you, but then sometimes, seemingly out of nowhere, your health will chunk down rapidly because apparently one did hurt you, but it wasn't really clear which one hit you and why they hit you in that particular engagement and not other engagements. So when you kind of have to start to cut through the crowd because the enemies are just too dense to actually be able to kill at range, you'll see what I'm saying, and you'll experience a little bit of the frustration of not really clear like what you did wrong. Obviously, in a perfect world, you're far away from an enemy, you have a good firing range set up, and you're just basically, slugging them down range, right? But sometimes that doesn't work out the way you want it to, and you have to kind of zigzag in and out of enemy forces, and it's during those moments that are the most tense, when you're not really sure if an attack is going to hurt you or not. And I think the game could be a little bit better, at least in defining those moments, because I have died many times and I'm not really sure how I did, because I feel like I did the same thing over and over again, but I got a different consequence. And that level of randomness, especially in a game where the entire player arena can be traversed in seconds, really does kind of distinguish if you're going to have a good time with this game. This game shouldn't make you feel like you've gotten a cheap death. This game should make you feel like you made a mistake, a tactical mistake. You made not even a tactical mistake. Maybe you made a mistake in your skills. and you invested too much into attack power, reload, or whatever it happens to be, and you didn't invest more into dodging or into armor or into a kind of tankier build with a bigger health pool. Those kind of punishments I absolutely accept and actually appreciate in all roguelike games, because that's what I want. I want the game to kind of, reward me when I'm good by allowing me to go deeper into the game, by expanding my weapon pool and my item pool. And inversely, I want the game to punish me when I do something stupid. So I learn and say, oh, maybe I shouldn't have taken that last piece of item. Maybe I should have invested in more passive stats instead of going ham and other things. So that is my big frustration. But short of that, everything else about this game is really masterclass. There are a ton of stats that you can manage in the game that will come to you in the forms of weapons or in items that will change how you play from run to run to run. No two runs will ever feel the same, other than maybe the first 15 seconds when you get a character with a starting weapon. Short of that, the weapon pools you begin to unlock, the builds you begin to go for, trying to find those phenomenal synergies is really going to make you play this game for a long time. And that's what's going to cut deep into that replayability factor, which is so good in this game. Because if you enjoy this type of experience, well, you're in for a treat, because as you unlock even more stuff, your builds are going to get even more insane. Sometimes they're really powerful, sometimes they're very gimmicky, but when you pull off a good synergy build, it feels great. A very simple one, as you've probably seen, is occasionally, not every time, but occasionally on a map, a tree will spawn. And if I kill the tree, I walk over, I get some upgrade materials. But I also took a perk that every time I destroy a tree, a little sentry gun just spawns in there to fight. Which is great, because on maps where there's lots of trees, well, I have the sentry kind of doing the work for me. And that kind of allows you to position the way your character, where you want to be, and where you want to stand. You want to be near a turret, you want to be far from a turret. And I like that. That's a very simple synergy. Now, obviously, there's a lot more, and there are these passive bonuses that you get when you begin to stack the same type of item. I'm sure you've figured out by now that my Brotato has 6 weapon slots. So I have multiple, machine guns and hammers, and later on I'll upgrade to a big chain gun. I have a medical gun, which kind of is a lifesteal, which gives me back a small amount of health points during certain engagements. And this is all phenomenal. I love it. But because I'm stacking the same type of gun with that SMG, it's changing how the other SMGs work. Additionally, if you have the same weapon, you can combine them to increase to the next rarity of a weapon. So if you want to have a gun, but you want a little bit better stats on it, well, find one of the same ones you currently have, and you can mush them together and get a stronger gun, which is cool. Because of the way that the power scaling works, and because of the way that you're going to be getting meaningful upgrades deep into your potentially 20 wave or beyond run, this means that, just because you built a gun up for the first 5 or 6 levels doesn't mean that a drop on level 7 could instantly render it obsolete. The game does reward you for changing out things, and it's constantly increasing that loot pool as you play to give you more tempting choices. Yes, you could play the entire game with 6 shotguns, and you'd probably be pretty effective. However, if you really want to have some fun, you'll start to find other upgrades that change how the shotguns work, or other weapons altogether. The goal, I feel like, in these games, and I've gotten to this point in Vampire Survivors, I'm not quite there yet on Brotato, but I feel like the point to these games is just to basically build an AFK. So you basically want to have the build where you just stand there and you're murdering things so quickly they can't get to you, and you're doing so much damage so fast that you're just kind of hanging out in the center. Now, that does mean you'll miss out on the trees. That does mean you'll miss out on the little treasure chests that pop up from time to time. But if you're crushing things that fast, well, you might just not matter anymore. The other thing that I'll mention here as well is in between each levels, on top of the perk and the leveling, it's important to take a look at your overall statistics, and to make sure that you're building a character that, if you want to go all in on one stat, that's fine. But since everything does have a trade-off, understand that you will be giving up some stats, and some stats will eventually go red. You'll be trading things like precision, for example, in exchange for firepower. And if your build supports that and you're clearing waves, then does it really matter? Now, the other thing I'll mention too, and this is something that's a little different, you're not really playing against the waves of enemies as much as you're playing against the clock. So every map is 60 seconds long, and what happens is at the end of 60 seconds, the map is over. All the treasure that's on the ground, with the exception of the stuff that you pick up from the trees, is instantly teleported into your bank. So you don't have to run around and pick up loot, which is great. You could just basically try to stay alive, which in the later rounds, that's all you're going to be able to do anyway. But it's nice that they basically have this giant vacuum cleaner that just sucks up everything and just puts it in your vault for easier use later. Now, a game like Vampire Survivors does that a little bit differently. Obviously, there's like the attract orb and some of the ways like a pentagram, which will like basically pull everything into you. But the reality is in that game, you have to kill and then you have to go collect. Now, the damage in that game is directly related to touching any enemy. So if you walk over an enemy, you're taking constant damage. Remember at the beginning of this review, I said my biggest frustration with Brotato was that at times I wasn't entirely clear on if an enemy would hurt me or not. And I think maybe that's partially why they created the loot sucker, for lack of a better word, at the very end. This vacuum cleaner that sucks up everything. Because I gotta admit, I don't necessarily want to cut through piles of enemies, especially when I don't know how they're going to behave and I don't know if I'm going to get hurt or not. So sometimes it's better to just focus on what's about to hit you. After a while, your eyes begin to train on certain enemy patterns, obviously avoiding the bullets that are being shot at you. And through that, I think you will find relative success in this game. Now, you will inevitably beat it very quickly. You'll get all 20 waves done. It's not that challenging of a game. I think the question is, after you beat it, are you going back? Are you beginning to customize a build differently again? Are you taking some of those really weird weapons that you got from your weapon pool and really exercising them and building some crazy build that pulls off some ridiculous synergies? That's where a game like this really earns its money, so to speak. That's why a game like Vampire Survivors is still something I play almost daily, because there's stuff to unlock and do. And I have to say the same is true with Brotato. Despite some of the limitations I mentioned, it is a gorgeous game. It's got a very bright, colorful, arcadey, cartoony palette to it. The upgrades, the weapons, the characters, the builds, they make sense, at least for what I've uncovered. And it is really a joy to unlock some crazy new weapon that you have never played with before and radically change what you think is a decent build. And I love finding those types of synergies and those combinations between skills and stacking, such that one action may do 4 or 5 cascading effects on the battlefield. That is a ton of fun. So that wraps up my thoughts on Brotato. It's available right now on Game Pass, as well as both PC and on console. It has been available for some time for purchase on Steam and on the Nintendo Switch, and I believe it is now also available on the PlayStation consoles as well. It runs great, looks great, tons of fun. Just remember that you're probably going to die, and when you do, a new run is just a click away. Thank you guys so much for watching. Take care of yourselves, and until next time, I will see you guys on the other side.